What's up everyone, it's Endymion, and today is a video long in the making for me as I'm going to explain to you why the modern audience curse exists and the often corporate reasoning behind it. So strap yourselves in, cause this is going to be a lot. But before I begin, if you like the video, consider subscribing and sharing it to give my life meaning, and hit the bell to be notified of future uploads. To start, I want to cover something that will help you understand what exactly is going on with modern entertainment and the world at large. So let's start with China and social credit scores. Trust me, this will all make sense eventually. In China, there's a concept that permeates throughout its society called the social credit system. Basically, every single citizen in China is ranked by their government in a leaderboard-like way when it comes to their cooperation. And the more you agree with the government and the more you parrot their propaganda, the higher your social score is. However, the more you resist the government, speak out against their policies, or do anything the government sees as problematic, well, your social score gets lowered. And as this score lowers, it essentially makes you a second-class citizen in society. Your ability to rent cars or fly on planes, for example, can be directly affected by this nebulous government-controlled ranking. This system is so powerful in China that, let's say, two people apply for the same job. If one has a higher social score than you, but you have better credentials, experience, and so on, the other person will be chosen regardless. This can even affect your social and love life, as people with lower social scores will be seen as beneath others. And you could even be ignored or ghosted because people with higher scores don't want to be seen with someone who is labeled problematic by the government. So if you think this is dystopian or messed up, well, you'd be right, because it is. It's basically a government-made system to keep their citizens in check by using fear and the use of blacklisting in the name of obedience. So now that you know what a social credit system is, you're probably wondering, what the hell does this have to do with entertainment or video games? Well, my friends, let's now talk about a very concerning metric, and honestly, this may just be the root cause of the modern audience curse, wokeness, diversity checklists, all of it. Let's talk about something called ESG. ESG stands for Economic, Social, and Governance. It's basically like the Chinese social credit system, except instead of being for individual people, it's a leaderboard ranking but for corporations. A company's ESG score represents how socially aware they are and how beneficial their actions are in theory to the world. Based on these scores, it allows investors and advertisers to know which companies are the most diverse and gives investors a clear indication to determine which companies are more, let's say, socially or environmentally friendly over others. Well, in theory anyways, but it's much darker than that. This ranking, however, is much like the Chinese social credit system in that it's very nebulous and constantly fluctuates. Some companies apparently even have high scores, like Nike for example, which uses diversity in its marketing to seem inclusive, yet they often use a child labor force to make their products. And then there's other companies with lower scores like Tesla, likely due to Elon Musk and his very public actions and the whole Twitter thing that's happening right now. But in my opinion, and I'll be blunt, this is what I think ESG stands for really. It's a system designed to rank companies based on how willing they are to bend the knee to whatever political or ideological concepts that the executives in control of everything want to push. And if a company falls in line and embraces said ideologies they are told to accept, their score rises, meaning advertisers and investors are more likely to work with them. Basically, the more woke these companies become, the more good they seem on paper. But in truth, the ESG ranking is not only very hard to understand, but to quantify too. Many companies like Disney or Amazon will push for identity politics and other woke messaging tactics in order to seem more diverse than they actually are. This is why networks like the CW, for example, have lost so much money in the long run due to their never-ending push for identity politics. Shows like Arrow or The Flash started off as good, solid shows, but eventually, as time went on, and things like ESG became more important, these shows went from being true to their characters and respecting their audiences to complete crap. And then there's Warner Discovery, who has pushed identity politics in many of their products from comics to shows, and this has led to DC Comics, which Warner owns, losing so much money amongst other parts of the company that they had to bring in someone like David Zaslav to restructure the entire business. Warner Discovery literally went so woke that they became broke because of it. This has led to reports that Warner only had enough money to release 2 films in the fall season. One of these films was Don't Worry Darling, and the other being Black Adam. That's it. That's all the money Warner had for advertisements and promotion, and it all stems from the indisputable fact that they've lost millions by going after the modern audience. But in reality, the concept of the modern audience is ridiculous, because in truth, there is no modern audience. There is not millions or billions of people out there clamoring for identity politics or woke messaging in their media, even if that's what journalists and corporations want you to believe. If anything, audiences across the board have largely rejected this propaganda and instead have been spending their money elsewhere. This push for woke diversity checklists has only led to disastrous consequences for these companies. Actors like Henry Cavill left The Witcher because Netflix didn't stay true to the source material. Rings of Power was a massive failure for Amazon because they didn't respect Tolkien's work and instead pushed for identity politics in an attempt to shield themselves from criticism. Not to mention the myriad of other properties from shows like Arrow, Westworld, Doctor Who, and more, all being tarnished into shadows of their former selves. Then there's some companies who have even used identity politics to smokescreen their own horrible practices. A good example of this would be Activision Blizzard, who, as many of you know, is basically a hellscape where female employees are harassed and new allegations seem to pop up every other week over there. But in order to mask their corruption and raise their ESG score in order to incentivize more investors, Activision Blizzard even uses algorithms to determine what characters they create in order to seem more diverse. And no, I'm not kidding. It was reported earlier this year that Activision Blizzard has a literal program called the Diversity Space Tool. It was developed alongside MIT and is used to help Activision Blizzard when it comes to deciding what characters to add in games like Overwatch or Call of Duty. This tool, which uses a technique dubbed the Diversity Space Method, determines how diverse a character is based on how well the character's design, backstory, and representation is. The Diversity Space Method is measured by 7 core principles, from culture, ethnicity, age, ability, body type, gender identity, and sexual orientation. Once a character is created, it's then fed through the algorithm, and then it's broken down into 10 different rankings and then given a score. Things like skin color, for example, with white characters being ranked lower, are taken into consideration. This is likely why, when Overwatch 2 launched, it had 3 new female heroes, each a different ethnicity, body type, and from different backgrounds. You may at first look at things like this and go, well, it's great for representation, right? But in reality, it's a smokescreen. It's corporations using algorithms and artificial intelligence to mass produce and manufacture tokenized products that they can then use to increase their ESG scores while scoring points with journalists and, in theory, their fan bases. Basically, what may seem like progressive to some is actually just being done to seem genuine and good while making no actual changes behind the scenes. I know it may be hard for some to accept, but corporations don't care whether their products have characters that show representation just for representation's sake. It's all designed so that they can push products that hit various criteria so they can attract more investors and pander to whatever is seen as politically correct at the given time. So the likelihood of a character being white, straight, and a man in Overwatch will almost never happen for years to come. Not because the developers don't want a character like that to exist, but because the algorithm will not be satisfied by it. But you can bet your ass you'll see a future Overwatch hero that's black, trans, non-binary, likely autistic, and probably a communist. And not because the developers want to make a character like that, but because the algorithm will likely explode due to how nuclear that character concept would be. And in turn, it could make them seem more progressive, even if they aren't. But it is hilarious because while Activision Blizzard uses this diversity tool on Overwatch, their other big franchise, Call of Duty, has a core team of characters like Captain Price, Gaz, Ghost, and so, all of them male and possibly straight, but who knows. And their most recent game, Modern Warfare 2, has made over $1 billion since launch already. This doesn't mean that because Call of Duty has white people that it is somehow more successful. The reason why it's such a success is because when it comes to Call of Duty, this year at least, so far anyway, it doesn't feel like they're pandering. Characters like Gaz or Price just feel like believable soldiers in a modern setting. They don't feel like they've been fed through an algorithm in order to meet some quota. They just feel like people. So what's the end goal of all of this? Why push this insane algorithm-based propaganda? Especially if it's not making money for most of these corporations. So what's the point in the end? Well, this may sound a little conspiracy theorist, but hear me out. It's because the global elites are trying to replace the fundamental concepts of the world with new and more controlling alternatives. Normally, the world has largely been designed around the concept of capitalism, which is a simple idea. The world and the services you can use are dictated by money and how much profit you can make. But this isn't enough anymore, and money, unlike mankind, has no feelings that can be controlled. So instead, concepts like ESG or social credit systems are being pushed in order to transform the world into a more easily controllable and weaker version of itself. If enough people adopt these new ideologies and concepts, then in 1 or 2 generations' time, the future humans of the world will be more tolerant and accepting of those practices. I mean, just look at younger gamers today. For anyone in their late 20s or beyond, the concept of battle passes, free-to-play games, and having content locked behind paywalls have always been things that we've hated, because millennials and those before us played games that were feature complete at release. Whereas these younger players have grown up in an environment where paying for literally everything all the time is normal for them. And when those ideas become the norm, it allows companies and corporations to push further because the general audience has grown accepting of it, since for many, it's all they know. I understand that this may all seem very bleak, but there is hope amidst all of this. And that hope is everyone who opens their eyes to these concepts and refuses to accept it. The very fact you're watching this video right now proves that you are at least to some extent willing to learn, even if what I'm saying is seen as conspiracy theory or not. Because the reality is that the global elites of the world, which I won't name because YouTube loves demonetizing content that calls them out, want to control everything. And by pushing propaganda in its various forms, these elites are hoping it'll mutate society into a weak and controllable group. And these companies are being shamed into pushing these ideas by the elites, which leads to many franchises and IP being destroyed in the process. These companies, whether it's Disney, Amazon, Warner, Apple, and so on, are being shamed into pushing ideas that they may not even agree with in the first place. Because if they do disagree or push back, then their score lowers and they're now deemed problematic. And once that happens, advertisers won't want to work with those companies. A prime example of this would be what's happening with Twitter right now because of Elon Musk. Advertisers like Audi and General Mills have pulled all their ads from the platform because of Elon Musk's takeover and push for freedom of speech. A large majority of these decisions are being made in order to present these companies in a relatable and non-problematic way so investors and shareholders won't blacklist or abandon said corporations. Because if there's one thing modern day people are terrified of, it's being cancelled or banned. Whether that leads to losing your job, social status, or sponsors, the modern day person is constantly in a state of fear if they say or do anything that isn't deemed right by the people in charge. But this isn't going exactly as well as these mega corporations would want either. I mean, just look at the explosion of content creators and fans like yourself pushing back against all of this. It's not because you're racist or homophobic or something. It doesn't mean you're bigoted either. If you feel unease about the world and where it's going, it's not because you're problematic as the media would love to portray you as. It's because you're a sane human being who knows evil when you see it. The destruction of intellectual properties, the push for ideological warfare upon young and impressionable people, and more is all a deliberate attempt to destabilize and, in turn, manufacture a society that is too dumb and scared to do anything but fall in line and agree with the elite. I mean, even the CFOs of companies are apparently not even convinced that ESG and all of this nonsense is a good idea either, because they're losing money in a pursuit to look better, but it's not working. Even companies like Warner Discovery, which lost tsunamis worth of money due to their woke crusade, have finally started to realize that what they were doing was never a good idea in the first place. And now they've brought back Henry Cavill as Superman, and hopefully decisions like these and more will lead to a stronger Warner Discovery that puts its strength in its IP and characters, rather than trying to appease an algorithm that doesn't care about them. This entire ongoing war between corporations bastardizing the things we all love is in the end a misguided venture that I genuinely believe will be largely rejected and replaced in the years to come. I can already feel the cultural shift of the world as I type this. I can feel the rise of actual free speech returning in some ways, and the political awakening of the masses that are finally realizing that none of these politicians care about you regardless of their political leaning. And the mass rejection of these idiotic concepts like diversity tools being clowned upon by not only normal people, but even the wokest of the woke. I really hope this video helped you understand that if you feel alone or confused by the state of entertainment and the world at large these days, I want you to know that you're not alone. And no, you are not crazy. This is all a massive operation disguised as progress in order for corporations and global elites to have more control than they've ever had before. And if you want to know what you can do about this, I would say watching this is a good first step. Explore alternative media, question everything, and never settle for anything you see, and always dig deeper. The only way things can change for the better is if people like me or you collectively stand together and stop consuming this garbage. People, whether they're black, white, trans, non-binary, or whatever else, are not just propaganda pieces for these corpos to use. We are not algorithms or cattle on an assembly line. We are human beings, and unlike the money these corporations feed off of, your emotions and thoughts are still yours. And it's up to you to not let these deceiving practices like ESG, diversity tools, or social credit systems determine your value or your place in this world. So keep resisting, because even if they won't admit it, we are winning. Thanks for watching, everyone. Consider subscribing and, more importantly, sharing this video if you think you gained any value or information from it. I would really appreciate it, and like the video because that helps videos like this be shared to more people too. Thanks to my patrons as always for their support. Hopefully I don't get shadow banned for this video, and I'm Endymion. Keep resisting, keep fighting, and more importantly, never lose hope. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.